Okay, hi. I apologize. I think this is probably the best light I can find in my house. I'm never going to be able to be a movie maker person, whatever they call them. I apologize for this. I'm getting ready to go to work for the night, and it's been a long weekend. My name is Julie Valerius. I'm actually looking forward to meeting some of you. I've been in classes for a while with you, so I'm excited to see some of your faces. I apologize for this. I did fall the other day, so I have a nice bruise on my face. Anyway, the purpose of this presentation actually is to let you all know what kind of things I learned in 452. And that has to encompass 451 as well, because I think that's really where it started for me. The site that I chose to do my practicum was the Monroe County Health Department. I live here in Monroe County in Waterloo, Illinois, small town Illinois, but I really do love it here. The topic that I chose was sexually transmitted infections, and especially how it's spreading among our adolescents. And not just them, but I think among people our age as well, because I think perhaps we haven't been educated the best in the past as to what some of these consequences are and what some of the stuff is that's out there that we really need to be worried about. So how did I do my presentation? I actually used a PowerPoint presentation for myself, and I had to just really kind of cover the surface of what I really would like to get into if I had more time, or I could do this presentation over. Would be like sort of a comprehensive adolescent health sort of thing. I'm not really sure what kind of programs they have in the schools. It's something that I want to do more research on and see what's actually out there when we talk about the health classes. What kind of things do they teach in health, and so forth. But some of the articles I read, I found very interesting. They do systematic reviews, really, of different programs. They find certain risky behaviors among adolescents that contribute to sexually transmitted infections. And some of them, talked about comprehensive adolescent health programs that have to include such things as either sexual health, mental health, things like that. So when it talks about comprehensive, it wants to talk about the health as a whole. And we know that from 451, we did some looking at Healthy People 2020. And they talked about some of the things that is concerning in population health and what some of the objectives and goals are. One of the things is sexually transmitted infections, and I found that by doing that windshield survey that we had to do, that's actually a pretty big problem here in Monroe County. I like to think that we kind of come across as this little bitty tucked in county that's a kind of a bubble, I suppose, and that problem doesn't really exist, but I'm pretty naive, I guess, in that sense, because it really is here. And a comprehensive adolescent health program would not only encompass sexually transmitted infections, but it would also go into, like I said, mental health. It would go into just health overall, general health. So those are some things that I would talk about further down the road, certainly if we had more time. The findings of my population, I told you, really was that I was looking to kind of address the adolescent population. It is a problem here in Monroe County. And when it talks about some of the risky behaviors, partaking in substance use is one of those, and I know that is also a problem here. So I know that that's a big major contributing factor. Another thing was like parental intervention. And I think that talking to Colleen, who's one of the LPNs at the health department where I was, she was saying that she ran into a little bit of sort of like an obstacle with the parents, because they kind of want to dig their heads in the sand and think that their kids aren't the ones that are doing what's being done. So I think that also is a contributing factor that I need to take into consideration. The audience that I had when I gave my PowerPoint was very small. I feel like I probably need to start at the top, but there's certainly it was such a small part of something that could be so much bigger. But what I talked about, again, was just the sexually transmitted infections. My audience was very small. I used a PowerPoint. I had a couple of nurses. I had some parents, and I happened to be related to the principal, the assistant principal of the school. So I had her there as well, and I really want to talk to her a lot more about what kind of things are on the agenda. And sometimes it's mandated from the state, of course, especially in the public schools. So there's only so far that you can go when it comes to curriculum and things like that. I used to teach in the private sector, and the curriculum was a little bit more flexible, but certainly here in the public schools, where I feel the majority of our children need to be educated, especially when it comes to health, it is probably the public schools. So some of my findings in literature, I was talking to you a little bit about some of these articles that go over the systematic reviews, talking about different risk behaviors, what are some contributing factors, what are some comprehensive intervention programs that some places are using, and going over some evidence-based. A lot of them came up with the idea that a program has to be a lot longer than just, you know, a couple of days or a couple of weeks. It needs to be a year-long program. So this would be something really that would be a class in school, and to really find that, to put that in a curriculum, I know can be very tricky. So it would have to somehow be completely manipulated and fit into whatever health programs that these schools already have. And they probably need to be reviewed and that sort of thing anyway. So the content of the presentation that I used when it talked about sexually transmitted infections is that I talked just so briefly really about the most common types of infections that we have: the chlamydia, the herpes, the HPV, syphilis, and gonorrhea. So I went over the signs and symptoms of most of those. You know, what do you do if you think you should have them? How are some things what are some medications we can take, or what are some ways that we can prevent? So it was really just a scratch the surface kind of thing as far as that's concerned. So that was my presentation. Sorry, I just have my list of what I need to cover in this video. Summarizing the main points. So again, really when I did the presentation was just the sexually transmitted infections, but like I said, if I had to do it over, I would really like to spend a lot more time on it. I think 8 weeks, although it went really fast for me because my time management skills went out the window when I started working nights for whatever reason. But I really do think that this is something that would be good to kind of start to incorporate and really look into. Like I said, I did my practicum at the health department, and they really do cover a lot of things that I didn't know existed. So, you know, WIC programs and sexual education programs, and the vectors, testing the mosquitoes for diseases, and how they have to check the well water and things like that. So these are things that I didn't really know existed. It's kind of the behind the scene things of the population health that I saw, and I really worked with a great bunch of people. So I learned a little bit about what everybody did there. I found everybody very, it's very small, but everybody was so opening and so welcoming, and just really flexible and eager to teach me what it is that they do, and I found that very comforting. So what would I change? I would go ahead and change that I had more time to do this, and I would try to encompass something a little bit more, again, talking about maybe a comprehensive program instead of just focusing on a sexually transmitted infection, because I think, you know, when it comes to adolescents, there's so much, and they're so vulnerable, and they have so much to learn, and it's just a different world than when we were younger. And I shudder sometimes to think about what it must be like to grow up and be a teenager right now. I don't know if there's any way I could make it. I'm glad to be sitting in my kitchen making a video for all of you. Takeaways from 452, really population health. I think the whole thing, I took away a lot of appreciation really for the bigger idea of what's going on in my community, not just my community, but in the world. And it's nice to know that there are objectives out there and things that people are doing and trying to research and trying to see what they can do better to make the overall population a better place. I really did enjoy the class. I really wish I would have had more time to dedicate to it. I found it very interesting. So I work on the trauma floor at St. Louis University Hospital, and I certainly, especially the past couple weeks, I've had some really young patients, and my heart breaks just a little bit sometimes. So whenever I can, I try to incorporate whatever sort of education I can when it comes especially to adolescent health. Even though they're probably, they're in their young 20s, I still think they're so young and they have so much life ahead of them. So yeah, I'll definitely be using that and trying to be more sensitive to the bigger things that are out there, and not just think that health and being nursing is just being in a hospital or a doctor's office, because there's really so much more out there. And I think as a population, we get so caught up in all of the things that we do on a regular basis that we forget about the basis of health and how important it really is. And I think that we've taken a lot of it for granted. So there's my presentation. I have to head off to work. I look forward to meeting all of you. Have a very, very Merry Christmas. Bye.